Just a little friendly reminder out there to all you listeners, make sure to subscribe to the National Land Realty Podcast. No matter what platform you use, there is a subscribe button. Make sure to click that. That's how we measure our success and measure the value that we bring to the table. Welcome to episode number 62 for the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. IRS Tax Code 180 is an often overlooked part of the United States tax code. This tax code allows for the depreciation of excess fertility in farm soil, and it's something that should be considered by any rural landowner, especially buyers. Today, we're talking with an expert on the topic, Alec Bean. Alec Bean, in addition to being a land real estate agent, is the owner and operator of Agricultural Soil Management. Agricultural Soil Management, or ASM, helps landowners manage their soil and specializes in helping landowners navigate IRS Tax Code 180. So, if you're interested in something that could save you thousands of dollars, this episode is for you. Now sit back and enjoy. And I am sitting here with Alec Bean. And Alec, you have a specialized company and a specialized field that you are working with, in addition to, I know that you work with real estate and stuff, but IRS Tax Code 180. And tell me what that means to you and tell me how you started working with it.
Thanks, Mac. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here and talk about this. This is a piece of the tax code that every rural land buyer, specifically farmland buyer, should at the minimum be looking into, because it can potentially save thousands of dollars in taxes and offer something that is a depreciable asset to an asset class that doesn't generally have a lot of depreciable qualities to it. So really excited.
Yeah. So tell me about your company and sort of how you got involved with it.
Sure. So my company is Agricultural Soil Management, ASM. I've been the owner since 2016, purchased the business. Kind of funny story, really. I actually worked for this company when I was in college as an intern, and the owner kind of recognized that, this is something that I was enjoyed and had fun doing, and he approached me actually, and we kind of worked out an arrangement, a unique arrangement to purchase his business. Don was his name. He started the business in the early 80s, focusing on soil testing and crop consultation. We're based in Central Illinois, Champaign to be exact, and we are the experts in soil testing and agronomic consultation. So we've been doing this over 40 years, the soil testing. And just a couple of years ago, one of my clients had reached out and asked if I had ever heard of IRS Section 180. And I hadn't, I didn't know what it was. He explained that land buyers are able to depreciate excess soil fertility. And that got my gears kind of rolling. So I did some research, consulted with some CPA firms and attorneys, did some further digging, and started conducting these reports for clients. And it's really been something that is very exciting for people to take advantage of.
Yeah, and so the fundamental sort of backbone of this is that excess soil fertility can be labeled as a depreciable asset.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I like, that was it.
Yeah. Right. It's crazy, really. It's really unique. And IRS Section 180 it allows a taxpayer engaged in the trade or business of farming to deduct expenses on the farm. Primarily, this is in relation to fertilizer, lime, potash, and other materials. So this goes hand in hand with the depreciation of other farm assets like tile lines, buildings, fences, irrigation equipment, grain facilities. This is just another piece that ties in there. And so how this works, if you want to just hop into that.
Absolutely. Let's jump in, because it's interesting. And so, I mean, the questions that people are going to have obviously is if something is in excess, what decides the median? Mm-hmm. How does somebody find out about getting soil testing? Things like that. Like, kind of walk us through from a high level view on how do you decide if something has excess soil fertility?
Sure. So let's just start off by walking through how we do this. And I think that'll open up the door to how someone can take advantage of it and if they qualify.
There we go.
So this is going to apply to land buyers, people that are engaged in buying. This is going to mostly be farmland. So a client purchases a piece of land, a farm, a soil test is taken, just like a normal. I mean, most of the time people are soil testing to determine nutrient levels anyway. Those nutrient levels on the soil tests are then compared to what the state's land grant university says is optimal for crop production. So in my case, I'm in Illinois, so I use the University of Illinois optimal crop production values to determine these numbers. So what you do is you have a soil test, and that says you have a certain amount of nutrients per acre. We are looking at phosphorus and potassium only. So the soil test says, okay, you have this level, and the University of Illinois says this level is optimal for crop production. If your soil test values are above that optimal number, that excess amount is what we are using to determine if you have an excess amount, and we are applying a value to that excess amount. So we use the university information, and I use the university of the state in which the parcel is in. So if I'm doing a report in Illinois, I use the University of Illinois. If I do Iowa, I use Iowa State, so on and so forth. So every state is going to have a little different. I take that excess number and I assign a value to that amount, to that nutrient load, using USDA values. So what's really safe about this is I'm using USDA numbers with quasi-governmental university information and marrying the two together. And that's what I believe makes this so safe.
Right. So you're using, and taking that into context, state-funded government grant universities who have done the research on soil composition and minimum requirements for fertility of soil. That's the sort of the basis that you're setting as overall, like, this is your median. And then anything in excess to that is this excess soil fertility that you can deduct.
Correct. Yes. So that excess amount, the IRS doesn't consider because you can't depreciate land, right? Land, that's like the one downfall of investing in land is there's really not a lot of depreciable assets to it. So the IRS says once you achieve, or you are in excess of a certain amount of nutrients, that does become a depreciable asset.
Sort of like, what you would see in minerals, or, you'll see that in minerals being a depreciable asset, or specifically, a lot of people use oil as something that they can do that if they have oil on their land. Like you said, somewhat limited. Not everybody's going to find oil on their land.
Right, exactly. And the folks in the timber industry do there's a similar method in the timber industry to depreciate value of standing timber as well. So a lot of neat things you can do with this.
Yeah. So what are some of the concerns that somebody would have coming into this? Because I mean, we just got out of a webinar where you're talking to a bunch of land agents about this same topic, and immediately they start queuing up with questions that I'm sure, like you mentioned, this is pretty much your everyday basis questions that you get from everybody. So what are the most common questions that you get asked, and what are the most common concerns?
So I think really the most common concern is, we should just talk about is, am I going to get audited? Is this going to trigger?
That's the one, I think.
I think that's on everybody's mind. And what I tell my clients is, you and I are just as equal. We have just the equal likelihood of being audited. We all have an equally likelihood chance of being audited. So if you have major concerns of being audited, I think this is not a risky service by any means, but if you do not have that tolerance for audit, then maybe this is not the right service, right? So I think that's the number one concern right there. And again, what I come back to, my answer for concern of an audit is, again, I use the governmental agency information married up with quasi-governmental agency information, and the guidance I've always received from CPAs is this is part of the code, and we just need to show that all of our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. And that's part of my service, is providing a full report that I back up, saying this is what, in my opinion, my professional opinion as a certified crop advisor, this is what the excess fertility is worth.
And so let's take that example that you gave, where this is primary benefit to a buyer. If I'm a buyer and I want to explore this option, what's sort of my process look like, and what do I need to keep looking for? As in, you work out of Illinois, and I'm in Idaho. I'm probably not going to be working with you necessarily. So I would talk to who, and I would talk to them about what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So far I have done, yes, I'm based in Illinois, but I've done reports all across the United States, Montana.
So I could be working with you. Okay. So Correct. Tell me how I work with you.
Yeah, exactly. So first off, you buy a piece of land, you buy a piece of farmland. The very first thing you need to do, there are two really important things. Number one, you need to have a soil test completed as close to the time of purchase as you possibly can. Now, the thing with the agriculture industry is we're very seasonally dependent. So if you buy a piece of land this fall and you close in December, okay, and there's snow on the ground's frozen, it's okay, don't worry. We can go out there, or you can have a soil testing company that you like to work with, collect samples in the spring, and you'll still be okay. So you need to have a soil test close to the time of purchase. The second incredibly important piece is, do not apply fertilizer between the time you purchase the parcel and the time you have that soil test done. I've had a few situations where a client buys a piece of land. They want to have my services. They want to use my services. Unfortunately, their tenant got a mind of their own and spread fertilizer before they could have a soil test done. So if you have a tenant farmer, you need to make it very clear that we're doing something special here, and you need to hold off on applying fertilizer before we can have a test done. And that happens. And it probably cost my client quite a bit of money. So we have the soil test done. I get the soil test results. So my company, we can do everything. We can go out, collect soil samples, do the analysis in our own in-house laboratory, do the reporting on the back end. I can do it all. Now, again, we are in the Midwest, so geographically, logistically, we are kind of stuck. My independent crew is kind of stuck in the Midwest. Now, I can coordinate crews other places in the United States, and you have a good network all across the United States. Or if you have another soil testing company you like to use, know, like, and trust, please, by all means, use them. So you either provide the soil test results to me or my firm takes care of the testing. So we have the test. I then say, okay, let's just use Illinois again, for example. Illinois has the optimal crop nutrition values, and I take those values and I compare them to your soil test. If your soil test is above those optimal values, say, great. I let you know as a client, I say, okay, I think this is going to be worth pursuing. I do these consultations at no charge, by the way. If somebody has a soil test they want to provide to me, I take a look at them and say, yes, this is worth pursuing or not. So little piece there.
Yeah.
So I say, okay, you have this nutrient value above the optimal, and this is probably about what it's going to be worth. Would you like to pursue a report? They say yes. Okay. So I produce a report that states per acre, you have a certain amount of dollars that I am valuing at this, or a certain amount of nutrients I'm valuing at this dollar amount. You take that report to your CPA. Your CPA then applies that to your return, your annual return. That's the high level of it. And really, it doesn't get much more drilled down either.
Yeah. Well, so and how does this work on a schedule? Because it's not typical, like it's not like the amortization schedule that you'll usually see like 15, 20 years on something else that you have on your land, right? So what does that look like when somebody is thinking about this?
Yeah. So we do need to back up and say that this is all how this is all run past my services. Once I give you an opinion of value report, this is really going to be up to your CPA, how they want to apply this to your situation. Most CPAs that I have done work with on this, they seem to be of the opinion that they want to try to take it all in 1 year. Who wouldn't, right? You want to take a hit against your income as much as you possibly can. So most CPAs will try to expense this over on one year.
O'Reilly.
Protect your vehicle's engine with Syntec and O'Reilly Auto Parts. Syntec Premium Full Synthetic Motor Oil is formulated for today's engines to dissipate heat and friction and reduce wear. Get 5 quarts of Syntec Full Synthetic and a MicroGuard Select filter for just $33.99. Limit supply. See store for details. Get Syntec only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There are some other guidance out there, which I see nothing wrong with as well. It does spread your risk out a little bit, I think, is this next approach. Some CPAs are recommending taking 60% the first year, 30% the second year, and then 10% in that third year. So that's another approach. Those are two, I think, of the kind of common approaches that CPAs are taking for this.
Right. But either way, we're talking full deduction, at least by year 4, right? As far as this whole thing goes.
Generally, yes.
Typically, but and again, with land, we can never say a definite. It's always situational, right? So you always have to throw those disclaimers on there, because eventually someone's going to be like, well, you said it would be 4 years, and now they're saying 5,
Right, exactly. And And in full disclosure, I think I need to say that, I am neither a tax or financial or legal professional.
Yeah.
I am an agronomist. I am a certified crop advisor with the American Society of Agronomy, but that does not allow me to make legal, professional, or tax advice. So you should seek that professional advice out.
I like to say, if you have questions, find somebody smarter.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of people smarter than me, believe me.
That's my usual default with anybody.
Yeah.
So tell me about, and just, to lay this out too, because we're talking about the median, sort of fertility requirements or minimum fertility requirements for production. Somebody falls below those requirements, then deduction is just not a possibility, right? I just wanted to say it just to get it out.
Right. That is a good point, because there were some questions in the webinar about that. And I think people should check out the webinar once it is up. Maybe you could put in the show notes or something.
Yeah.
Really dig in. But yeah, if the soil test indicates that there is no excess fertility above what the state is claiming or is issuing as optimal, we just don't go any further. There's nothing there, and there's no need to report that to anybody either. It's just, I look at the soil test, I say, there's nothing here to work with. I'm sorry. Better luck next time. Yep.
So if a landowner is to pursue this,
mm-hmm.
what are the costs associated with, what's a typical cost? And if that, I'm going to ask the question so you can deny me, because it's going to be situational. So you can bring that up too, because depending on size of land and stuff like that, you might have different cost bases, but just so somebody understands a range that they might look at to get the soil testing and get the analysis and get the report. And then what's sort of the ROI on that? What are they looking to save on their deduction on a, let's say, by acre? What's typical, or is there nothing typical?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I kind of do my services two different ways. So the first way would be if you have a soil testing company, like and trust, great. Now I play nice with everybody. You have that company do the testing for you. Again, it's going to come back to, they need to be reputable. They need to be a reputable laboratory, working with a reputable laboratory, practicing sound agronomic principles, all the good stuff. Okay. So you send me your results. I conduct a report based off those results. I charge $10 per acre for that service. If you need me to take care of everything, and this is where the situational piece comes in. If you're in the Midwest, I would be very comfortable telling you that I charge $20 per acre for the entire service: sample collection, testing, running the analysis, and conducting the report. $20 per acre. Outside of the Midwestern region, again, happy to take care of you, but those numbers may vary a little bit, because I'll have to coordinate a contractor. Gotcha. So as far as return goes, there is not a typical number, but I will say that if a farm has been well taken care of from a fertility perspective, the previous owner was even somewhat diligent in applying fertilizers or manures and kept the fertility up, it's generally not very hard for me to find between $200 and $500 per acre in value, in excess value.
That can be depreciated.
That can be depreciated, but potentially depreciated. Yes. I've done a few reports that have been in the $1,000 per acre range. And I just did one. This is extremely rare. This was from a dairy farm, actually, where they had been applying manure for many, many years. The value was about $3,000 per acre on that one. Yeah. So that's one that's a little risky, because it could throw some flags, but the vast majority of the reports that I conduct, and I've conducted quite a few now, they fall in that $200 to $500 range pretty consistently.
So this is, and that's sort of the sticking point, right? Is the previous owner, like you were talking about a dairy farm, and they're spreading manure, so they're just constantly just supplying new nutrients to the ground. So it's the case where, like, if the previous owner is really taking care of fertilizing and keeping the soil strong, then you get that advantage when you buy.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people have said, well, that's double dipping. And I say, no, it's not, because the previous owner has taken advantage of expensing those items out during their ownership. And you are getting to take advantage of that on your side as part of the purchase, because you're purchasing an asset. Just like in the commercial world, there's the cost segregation studies. You know, if a building has been maintained and added to things that are adding value to that building, you buy that, you can appreciate that. This is the exact same idea, very similar idea, where you are buying an asset, and the government wants to. That's the incentive. The government incentivizes people to create these economic. They'll incentivize you to do economic things, and this is one of those pieces.
Right. So is there any kind of risk along the way where you get the soil study done, you get your report, you go in, you file for your depreciation, and is there a risk of retesting after, say, you purchased and done this and then sort of dropped more fertilizer on it?
No matter where home is, Dynagrow Seed is made to perform on your acres. With a proven track record for consistent performance year after year, Dynagrow Seed delivers innovative seed solutions to maximize your local acre. Purchase confidently knowing you have a partner to connect your land with the right seed hybrids and varieties for your local conditions. Book your seed today at your local Nutrient Ag Solutions or visit dynagrowseed.com to learn more. Dynagrow Seed, made to perform here.
So I think the risk there is that this is really a snapshot in time of your time of purchase. So at the time of purchase, this is what the soil test indicated was there from a nutrient perspective. And while that will change over the years as crops are taken off the field, things of that nature, I really couldn't see a situation where a government entity would come in and say, oh, we're going to conduct our own testing to verify this. It's just, I think that's a little bit more effort than they will probably want to put forth.
Which makes sense. I was just curious about that because it was one of those like, well, yeah, I got my soil test done and then I added fertilizer and they came back and want to double check my soil. I think that's probably why you want to use a reputable testing company in the first place, right? To
Absolutely.
Where you have like a very detailed report. It's targeted towards this type of deduction, that sort of thing. So this general depreciation is available nationwide, correct?
To my understanding, yes. This is a federal piece of the code.
Yep. So this is something that everybody can and should be taking advantage of when they buy it. What's the statute of limitations that constitutes a new buyer of property? Can you own it for a couple of years and then get it tested, or how does that work?
So I've heard a few different perspectives on that. So the most important piece is having a soil test as close to the time of purchase as possible. And I have heard some CPAs say that they'd be willing to go back 20 years and do this.
Oh my. Okay.
That is a I don't know. I think that's a little dangerous, but if a CPA is willing to put their name on it, then all, let's go for it. So I think
you have to do some risk acknowledgement at that point. Like, yeah, we'll do it, but
exactly. That's just, that's again, if they want to do it, let's go for it. So I think really most of the guidance I've received from CPAs is 3 years. Going back in history, 3 years is pretty safe. And if you don't have a soil test though, from that time, there's just nothing that we're going to be able to do, unfortunately, though.
I got you. So
Yep.
What are the risks if somebody does this? And I mean, they're pretty straightforward, but like what could, as somebody is assessing this, like, okay, could I do this? What sort of risks could they incur?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, audit's one. I think probably the less scary part is that the IRS just says, no, we don't accept that. So you incur my fees, which are an expense. So that's okay. You incur my fees and your CPA fees for that time that they spent on it. So those, from my perspective, those are the main risks involved.
Which is fairly minimal. I mean, nobody wants to go through an audit, but if it's part of the tax code, then it kind of works with it. Like it's going to be fine. It's
right.
The heaviest variable on the entire thing is going to be what you are able to deduct per acre, right? Because it just depends, and it just depends on how it stacks up, and it depends on the fertility of your soil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you measure it out as a whole when you do this? Like, are there hot spots? Like one area of the soil is really great and then the other area is junk. Do you work an average together, or do you split up the property? How does it work with variances on the property?
Mm-hmm. So it is currently an average. We aren't seeing any reason to geospatially spread this out. So it is an average. And we are testing on a grid pattern. Generally, I want to see a grid pattern for the testing. And as long as the grid pattern that's used is agronomically sound, there's not a lot of concern there either. Mm-hmm.
What's the timeline typically from let's say engaging you to getting results?
Mm-hmm. So if you have a soil test already and you send it to me, it takes me not very much time at all to look at the test and say, yes, we have something to work with, or no, we don't have anything to work with. I can get a report in that scenario turned around in less than a week. Very quick. If you need us to do the soil testing, the whole service, the soil testing, conducting report, that's probably a 2 to 3 week turnaround time on that. Okay,
so it's 2 to 3 weeks. The actual testing itself in a grid pattern, is that a bulk of the time, or how long are you typically on site when it happens for one of these jobs?
Sure. So a site visit, depending on the acres, it won't take very long. My crew and I, we can get across in our normal soil testing kind of regimen. We can get across 1,000 acres a day.
Okay.
So, yeah, not very long, especially if it's an 80 or something. And 80 will take us in like half hour, but there's drive time and all those things to consider. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's quick. It can be very quick.
It is. So available for any buyer.
Yep.
It's a deduction. And it can save people a lot of money. It seems pretty straightforward. I think this is a useful tool for pretty much any land buyer out there.
Sure. Yeah. And I think this isn't a risk. I would not classify this as a risk, but it is a consideration, something that people need to think about when they are planning out what they want to do with their land on a long-term timeline. So the IRS will want to recapture what you've depreciated at the end of the game. And by end of the game, I mean you sell the property. because this is going to hit your basis on the front end. So if you buy a piece of land for $10,000 per acre, we determine that there's $500 per acre in excess fertility value. That knocks your basis in the property back to $9,500 per acre. At the end, when you go to sell the property, the IRS is going to say, hey, remember that depreciation that you took? We're glad that you took it, but now that you're selling this property, we want our little cut of that as well. So there is that piece of it.
So would you classify it more as a tax deferment?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what I was going to roll into next.
Okay.
Most of the people buying farmland outside of, say, your institutional investors. So the number one, owner operator, so farmers that are buying land, generally, and regular just maybe investors that are interested in farmland, but they're not in the institutional side of things. They generally aren't going to be selling their farmland in their lifetime. If they sell it, most of the time they are seeking a 1031 exchange. And so this would roll perfectly into a 1031 exchange because you get those tax advantages from the IRS Section 180, and you kick that can down the road when you roll that over on a 1031. So you never get that recapture on the 1031. So that's the vast majority of my clients, again, are owner operator farmers and investors, and that's their plan. So if you need to take into consideration what your exit strategy is on a farm, if you're buying a farm to quote unquote fix and flip in a 2-year, 3-year time frame, I don't know if you need to determine if this makes sense to do or not. But if you are buying for your farm operation or for a long-term investment, it's an absolute no-brainer.
That I had not thought of it on that terms in terms of the flipping scenario, but you're exactly right. That would mean there wouldn't be any reason to do something like that in this situation. But if it's a buy and hold and then 1031, that would make excellent sense. And so it's one of those, you need to have good professionals around you that can give you good advice, that can help you form a plan instead of just buying land.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before contacting me, I should have this as step number one on my information. Before contacting me, but after buying your parcel of land, you need to talk to your CPA whether or not this is going to make sense for you. And
Yeah.
I have a network of CPAs that I work with that are kind of specializing in this, in agricultural accounting services, but they're very in tune with IRS Section 180 that I am happy to make recommendations for folks.
I was going to say that even falls before finding or talking to your accountant, is to make sure your CPA knows agriculture. Like that's step one, is find that, because you can talk to a CPA. That doesn't mean they know anything about this code. So yeah, there's a few steps in there, and I'm sure, a lot of people that are land buyers are going to already have that, but there's a chance that somebody's new to market in land, right? And the ins and outs of these kind of things, it's easy to make mistakes.
Right. Yes. And that's what we're trying to do to avoid. And that's why I'm here to help cross the T's and dot the I's for my clients. Excellent.
Well, Alec, I can't thank you enough for the conversation, man. I've listened. This is the second time today I've listened to you talk about this topic, and it's still interesting. And I could dig in for longer. Want to give you a chance to plug your company and how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Yes. So Agricultural Soil Management, ASM, we are on LinkedIn, Facebook. We do have a website, asmlabs.net. We are the experts in soil testing and agronomic consultation. We work with everybody, farmers, land investors, institutional investors, in fertility diligence is what we're billing ourselves at. We are no longer a soil testing company. We are a fertility diligence company. So check us out on, again, LinkedIn, Facebook, and our website.
Excellent.
Love to help you out.
Alec, appreciate your time and your expertise, sir.
Thanks, Mac. Appreciate your time too.
This concludes episode number 62 for the National Land Realty Podcast, discussing IRS Tax Code 180 with owner of Agricultural Soil Management, Alec Bean. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.